What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Sweat It Out podcast. Today we have a special guest all the way from the Big Apple. This dude right here is a friend of mine. He's an entrepreneur, a father. He's a great figure for the community. This man's a fitness advocate. I'm telling you, this guy does it all. Welcome, Michael Chernow. What's up, brother?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Of course, man.
We know you're very busy, so we appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
So how you been, my dude? How's everything going?
You know, man, just trying to make the best of a shitty situation. I'm finding the silver lining in every opportunity I can. I'm still hitting it hard with my training. Focused on building new opportunities, and really, this has been an incredible opportunity for me to spend time with my wife and kids, because I never thought in a million years that I'd have the opportunity to spend this much time with my wife and kids at this stage in my career.
No, that's truly amazing. I know we've talked about it before, and I know even in your podcast, we've talked a little bit about that, about how this has been a blessing in disguise, being able to take this time and use it as an advantage to be with our families and focus on other areas of our lives that, maybe we weren't paying too much attention to, or that we want to start paying attention to. So, the fact that you brought that up is definitely truly amazing. So I got to ask you, because I know you told me that, I know you're from the city, and now you're, slightly off of that. How's that transition gone for you? How's that going for you? How are you feeling about that? And what are some of the things you're doing differently now from that hustle and bustle of New York to now being on the outskirts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm born and raised in Manhattan, in New York City, right? And so for New York City people, it's really hard to make a transition from, the convenience of what New York City has to offer and the culture of what New York City has to offer, especially in my line of work, because I'm a restaurateur. So I'm surrounded by people constantly. I'm at my best when I'm like out in front of a big group of people, just sort of, being hospitable and being of service. When the whole thing hit, my family and I made a conscious decision and said, look, the restaurants are one restaurant group, Seamore, is closed until further notice. However, it's open now. But when this whole thing hit, we were like, all right, we're going to shut all the restaurants. And then the Meatball Shop decided to stay open, but there was nothing I could do to help both of the restaurants. And there's teams running those companies now. And so I didn't have anything really tying me to Brooklyn, is where I live, that needed me day to day that I couldn't handle online. And so I said to my wife, why don't we just go upstate? Because we have a house about 2 hours north of the city. Let's go upstate, let's play it safe, and let's see what happens. And we came up here, and to be honest with you, it's a blessing because we're outside all the time. We're on the property, and I've got a big piece of property up here. So I'm not like, we have a lot of land and the kids run around all day. I mean, I have a pretty sick garage gym. So as long as I'm able to stay physically fit, mentally, if I'm able to stay physically fit, it really feeds my mental state, which is typically positive and optimistic. And so I've stayed positive and optimistic throughout the whole process. I've really adapted well to it. And it's tough being in the restaurant business in a time like this. There's no doubt about it. However, I have figured out a way to just say, you know what, I'm just gonna, I believe that the lessons are in the pause, man. I believe the lessons are in the pause. And a lot of the time, we walk through life without the ability to take a pause, right? Because we're just like, go, 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 go. This has been a big pause. And so I think it's given the globe an opportunity to sort of look at priorities and see what really matters and understand that, like, we are going to be okay. As long as we stay sane, we start thinking more about taking care of ourselves, we're going to be okay. Everybody's in it together. And it's a big pause. And I believe the lessons are there. I believe the lessons are in the sort of the quiet moments when, you know, you're able to get present and look at what's happening. So I'm actually cool. I'm happy. I've acclimated pretty well.
How, let me ask you something. So, you know, I grew up in upstate New York, kind of like in an area that you are describing that you're in right now. I'm much farther north than where you're currently located. But growing up, you know, I enjoyed being outside, being able to do all those things, like, you know, raising a family in the city and then kind of transitioning to be able to spend a decent amount of time, you know, in the country. How has that transition been? And have you seen a difference in, like, you know, the way that your family interacts? I'm just curious on like a personal level, right? Because I grew up in an area like that, and, you know, living in a relatively big city like we do in Miami, and, you know, interacting with my clients. You know, Mendez and I talk about this all the time. You know, I always wonder, like, what the difference really is raising a family in a major city compared to, you know, being out in the country. Because I was just a kid, you know, so I wasn't really paying attention.
You know, it's interesting. So growing up in New York City, I think there's a lot of, I know that there's a lot of assets, you know, growing up in a city like New York. One, you're exposed culturally from day one, right? So like when it comes to food, when it comes to style, when it comes to just sort of like the way people communicate, it's the exposure is real and it's viral and it's in front of your face constantly. The other beauty about growing up in New York, and I'm learning a lot about this now, right? Because not only are we dealing with this pandemic, but we're dealing with a lot of social injustice that has been surfacing for a long time, but now is at like at a peak. It is really sort of hit a place in time where things are actually starting to change for the better, even though it took a terrible, absolutely god-awful catastrophe for some people to open up their eyes. However, I will say that growing up in New York City, and I've taken some flack for saying this, but I got to be real to who I am, right? Like, I got to be honest and real. Like, I grew up in New York City where I didn't see color. You know what I mean? Like all my friends were white, African American, Latin, Asian. You know, like I went to public school in New York City, man. There was 3,000 kids in my public school. They were from all over the world. And so racism, you know, from my lens, from my perspective, did not exist. Now what I've learned is that it might not have existed for me because I'm a white man in New York City. However, the kids that I was hanging out with, the African Americans and Latins, probably experienced racism. And I just didn't know it. And so that's what I'm learning now, right? About that particular thing. But I will say that, like, growing up in New York City, having the diversity was really, really important to me. And you don't get it up here in upstate New York. It's just, you know, it's pretty white.
Yeah, where I grew up was like, I think like 98.9% white or something like that. You know, it wasn't, you know, I mean, there were obviously racists up there, you know, but you just kind of disassociated yourself with them, which, again, right, it's not necessarily the most active way you could go about it. You know, and I've had my own thoughts on that after everything that's happened in America lately, you know, but I think, you know, being integrated, I mean, we live in a majority Latin community, you know, but not just Cubans, you know, Venezuelans, pretty Colombians, you know, Argentinians, Brazilians. So we have a giant melting pot as well.
In the world.
What's that?
All the best looking people in the world.
I mean, you're looking at one right here.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. You know, so I completely understand where you're coming from, you know, and I also have seen the other side, right, from small town America. And there's definitely a ton of room for us to grow and us to learn and us to become, you know, better citizens across the board in order to uplift everyone in America, to make sure we all can have better lives, right? I think that's the majority of Americans would prefer that. I would think, right? I mean, I'm just a schmuck, but, you know.
Well, I'll say that that component of being born and raised in New York City was very special and unique to the rest of the country, quite frankly.
Yeah, millions upon millions of people.
Yeah, 9 million people in New York.
Insane.
And so that is something that I am super grateful for. But on the flip side of that, you're also exposed to an enormous amount of debauchery and, you know, walking down the wrong path, which I did, like with intent, you know, hard, like very hard. And so, you know, but before my wife and I had kids, you know, we've been married a long time. And we didn't have kids until 5 years ago. And we've been together, you know, over 15 years. You know, we met when we were about 7 years old.
Crazy.
But you know, we decided that, you know, we were going to have kids in the city. And I was pretty adamant about that because I really wanted my kids to grow up in the diverse sort of climate that I grew up in. And I wanted them to have the street smarts that I have. And when this whole thing came about, that conversation came back up and we said, well, do we want to make this shift upstate and try to raise them upstate? And what I will say is that, like, watching my kids outside all day long, running around in the woods, getting dirty, you know,
that was the best part of my childhood. The best part.
Finding snakes and lizards and turtles and frogs and toads and, you know, fucking bugs and all sorts of fun stuff. Like, you don't get that in New York City.
Yeah.
And that is really special and awesome as well. You know, like, the other piece about growing up in New York City, you know, and anybody who tells you different's lying. When the toilet breaks, you call the super.
Someone fixes it. Yeah. Someone fixes it. Yeah.
When you know, the air conditioner stops working, like, you don't climb up into the fucking ceiling to fix it.
That fixes it now.
And so now, you know, like, I've been thrust into this thing, and luckily I have a lot of experience with handiwork in the restaurants because I've been building restaurants for a long time.
Right.
But, like, you know, I will say, like, before that, I didn't know a screwdriver. Like, if you would have grabbed me a Sawzall, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Hold up.
Yeah, I've had plenty of experiences like that with some of my friends. Like, hey man, can you, like, come over and help me hang this picture frame? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. They're like, I don't even have a hammer. I'm like, oh, I'll be right over. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you know, look, I think that you learn, there's life skills that you pick up in growing up in a city that are invaluable. Mm-hmm. There's also life skills that you pick up growing up in the country that are invaluable. So right. I do believe that they balance each other out. It's beautiful to see my kids so happy up in the, you know, in the country and jumping into the pond every day, and, you know, me pulling leeches off their ass and stuff like that. But, you know, like, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, but so
that's great.
I just, it's tough for me to say where I, you know, what I would prefer. I think both places offer a wealth of you know, sort of asset. And
yeah, I would agree with that.
Take it a day at a time. You know, my wife isn't sure if she's ready to be full-time country. I'm not sure if I'm ready to be.
Hey, 50-50, you know, a 40-60 is not a bad thing at all.
Pickup truck, though. I do want a pickup truck.
Oh yeah, hopefully not a Ford though. Hopefully not a Ford.
That Raptor's pretty bad.
It is.
Yeah, they are pretty dope. I know. I have a couple of friends with those. Those things are pretty sick.
So, brother, I gotta ask you, since now we were talking about the upbringings and, you know, the country and the city and, you know, the different experiences and all that. I want to see if we can dive in a little bit into the way your upbringing was in New York. And I know we touched a little bit upon it, but I want to go a little deeper and how you felt that played a huge role in the person you are today, doing the amazing things that you're doing, and just being a leader in what you do. And I want to hear from you, you know, how that upbringing helped mold you through those experiences, through those tribulations, you know, through those failures and successes, how you became who you are today. If we can go back a little bit into that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up in Manhattan, on 87th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue. It's pretty safe, nice neighborhood. You know, my parents did not have a lot of money. They weren't broke, but I would say we were like lower middle class. And my father was a very physically and mentally sick dude. And we, as a family, all dealt with that. We lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment, my sister, my mother, my father, and I. And so my sister and I shared a bedroom for ever. And that was really frustrating. So I think from as early as I can remember, I always wanted to get out of my house. I always wanted out. My dad was really aggressive and violent and abusive. And so I just always wanted out. And so I, at an early age, learned that I have, and I think it's probably my strongest sort of attribute today, is that I love people. I know how to, sort of chameleon myself into any situation. I'm really good with people. People are my energy. People are my oxygen. And I thrive in communicating with people. And so I learned early on that I had this sort of charming way about myself, and I can kind of get into any situation I wanted to get into by using that skill set. And so I was like sleeping over at friends' houses, all through elementary school. And, I got into sports pretty young, and then I ended up playing ice hockey on a scholarship. And I would like sleep at the rink. I was just out. By the time I was 12, 13 years old, I was doing drugs, and I was working in a restaurant at 13. I had already figured out a way to make money. Freshman year in high school, I got into high school, and I very quickly found the rough and tumble kids, and I was selling drugs, and I was doing a lot of drugs, and it was rough at home. It was really bad at home because I was completely reckless, and my dad was already an animal, and me being reckless and him being who he was like water and oil, man. It was bad. And so we were fighting constantly, and the police were showing up to the house all the time because our neighbors were calling because we were, in a fist fight, all the time.
Wow.
And the child services got involved, and they were like, look, you guys obviously cannot get along. Your son is sleeping on the couch. Your daughter's sleeping in the bedroom. You guys are sleeping on a Murphy bed in the living in the dining room. We're going to take this kid and put him into foster care. And I was like, I was 14 going on 15. I'm like, you think you're putting me in foster care now? You're crazy. Yeah. No way. I'm out. And so I packed my bag and I left, and I moved out of my parents' house. And I said, look, you guys, you're going to have to find me because there's no chance that that's happening. I've already been out, most nights. I'm not going to some foster situation. And so I made a deal with my mom, and I told her that I would go into outpatient rehab if she would just be cool with me staying with a friend. And I was friends with this girl that was living she was going to NYU. She was a freshman at NYU. So I was friends with her, and I was crashing at her dorm. And I was like, look, I'm going to crash at her dorm. It's all good. I'll go to outpatient rehab. I'll get my shit together, and then we'll figure this out, when things calm down. And so I did that.
You were like 14, 15, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
When I was 15 is when I made the decision. I was out.
And your friend was in college?
Yeah.
So that charm was working.
Oh, charm was working.
How was it having to make a decision like that at 14, 15 years old though? I
think I was at that point, I had already been through a lot, I had a really tough relationship with my father, and I don't blame him for it. Some people are meant to be parents. Some people aren't. I think my father did really love me. I just don't think my father knew how to express his love. He was a selfish guy. He was sick himself. He was a juvenile diabetic, constantly dealing with his illness, and probably not happy about his life. He was on permanent disability. He made no money. And so he was a miserable guy. And I think that he just didn't know how to control his emotions. And so he took it out on me for the most part. And so that decision was actually a very easy one for me. It was like, I'm out. This is official. Come find me. I'm not coming home. I was off to the races. I at that point I was like knee deep in the bad news. I was just, I was doing not great things. And, but I honestly could say that I don't regret a minute of it. I would not have changed any of it. I needed to go through what I went through to get to where I'm at. I believe that in my core, my soul, and my heart. I also know that I was never a bad person, but I did some bad things that I had to learn from, and I had to get punched in the mouth many, many times. And so I kept on walking down this bad path that wasn't great. But I graduated high school, and I was working in the nightlife. I was working in restaurants. I was working in nightclubs. I always figured out a way to keep a legitimate job, even though I was, playing with the wrong crew. And I fell in love with hospitality. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the night. I was really a night guy. Like the night was just the energy of the night really got me going. And, I got into some trouble in New York. I beat it, headed out to the West Coast. Did not do well on the West Coast, came back to New York.
What part of the West Coast?
LA.
LA.
And, New York City kid, never driven a car before, somehow, some way passed his driver's test.
Wow.
And just, we don't drive in New York City, right? So
no. Only the extremely wealthy drive in New York City,
Yeah.
And taxis, Ubers.
It was like trains, taxis, skateboard, bike,
Mm.
That's how you got around. And so partying at night, like you never thought, oh wait, I have to get into a car and drive. However, in LA you do. But like, I didn't stop partying the way I was. And so I just I'm lucky to be alive. And so I came back to New York. My dad had passed away. I came back on, for Christmas. My father passed away on January 9th, 2001, right before 9/11. And then I just never went back to LA. Literally, I left all my shit out there. I just did not even go back. I just
didn't even have a thought. Just like, nah,
Just
fuck
book
it.
That's like literally where I was in my life.
Unreal.
Oh, whatever.
Unreal.
I'm not going back. My car, my clothes, like all of it. I was just like, whatever, I'm done.
Wow.
And stayed in New York. I was a complete mess. And that was my father passing away, even though I had such a shitty relationship, was just a great excuse for me to take my addiction to, drugs and alcohol to the next level. Cause I was like, my dad died. You gotta, feel bad for me. And so I did, and just kept digging this hole, knowing inside though that I was a good guy, just could not figure it out. Anyway, it got ugly. And finally at 23, my boss, I had a job in a restaurant that I loved, and I was there for a long time. My boss took me aside and said, dude, Mikey, like, I love you. Everybody pretty much loves you, but you're a complete mess and you're killing yourself, and you're like my son, and I'm not going to watch you die. So you're fired, man. I'm not going to watch it happen. If you can't get your shit together, you got to go somewhere else. And that was the first time I had a real wake up call. A guy that I really looked up to, that partied with me, by the way, took me aside and said, dude, I'm not going to watch you die. And I got sober the next day. I walked into an AA meeting and I fucking surrendered. And I said, I can't do this shit anymore. And I've been sober from that day on, 16 years. Actually, 2 days ago was my anniversary.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. I think it's amazing more that sometimes we realize it in life that we need to have those moments, those hard hits where it's like, wow, like this was that breaking point for me to be able to transition into another new chapter and create a different direction in my life. And it's amazing when you hear from so many different people that moment that they have in their transition point to then really catapult the rest of their life or moving forward to wherever they are now currently. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I can definitely say that there's a lot of people listening to this, a lot of people that are going to watch this that can definitely use that advice in that experience of yours to be able to realize that, you know, you're not doomed, you know, that people go through mistakes, people face obstacles, they face these tribulations, they go through these ups and downs, but there's always a way, you know, and it's just being able to, like you said, you always held in, which I really love that you said that, you mentioned it a few times, you always held in that you knew you were a good person. And that is definitely the truth, because, you know, off the bat, when we met, that was the first vibe. And I was like, this guy's energy, this guy off the bat is such a genuine, awesome, good person. And that's the energy you rub off on people and on myself. So you holding on to that, I can definitely just hear from that really also helped you push through these times. And, you know, I can definitely say a lot of people are going to definitely benefit from this.
Nice, man. I mean, one thing that I'll say about it, because I think a lot of people, I don't share a ton about my sobriety. Not that I'm ashamed of it, not that I'm, don't want people to know. Like, I actually am totally comfortable and cool with the fact that I am sober. But one thing I will say is that a lot more people than you know struggle with addiction. And it doesn't always manifest itself in drugs and alcohol. It could be in anything. It's shopping, gambling, eating, sex. There's many, many things that people sort of bury themselves in, right? The one thing that I will share here is this. I hate hearing people can't change. I absolutely hate hearing people can't change. I am a living example of someone who truly 180'd his life. Like, I 180'd my life. I changed everything. And even though, like I said, at my core, I was always a good soul. If you were to take a snapshot of what my life was like 16 years and 3 days ago to what it is today, you would never, ever think that I'm the same person. So what I'm saying is that if you are listening to this and if you are struggling, there is a solution, and it's a lot simpler than you think. It's not easy, but it is simple. And I'm a living example of that you are not doomed. Like Anthony just said, there are a lot of things you can do to relieve yourself of that self-hatred. And I'm a living example of it. Anyway, when I got sober, I found fitness and wellness, and I've been on that path since day one. I found spirituality, I found fitness, I found wellness, and I started to slowly but surely begin to love myself. Because I also believe that as human beings, we are here for two things: to love and be loved. Those are the two things that we are here for. And somebody said something to me recently that really resonated. And he said, humans are motivated by two things: fear and love. And the one you practice most, he said, human beings are motivated by two things: fear and love. And if you practice one, the other one will begin to disappear. And
it's a great message.
You know what I mean? It's like, I know that we are here as loving beings, and all the decisions that we make, good and bad, are in pursuit of love, right? Like, people murder over love. People win massive, achievements over love. I just believe that, and so the closer we can get to that and understanding that is ultimately what it's all about. It's all about love. And, there's a study, a human study, the longest human study in history, or maybe American history, but I think it's actually in history. It started in 1936, I believe, in Boston. They took 700 males that were 350 of them were sophomores in Harvard, and 350 of them were from the roughest streets of South Boston. All dudes at like age 20 or 21 or something like that, 19, 20. And they followed them. They're still following them. And some of them have passed it on to their kids. But what they found in this human study and I think they send them a questionnaire once a month or once a quarter, is that there's really one common thread amongst happy people throughout life. And what they learned was great personal relationships is a direct correlation to a life of happiness. It's not money, it's not things, it's not, you know, models and bottles. It's great personal relationships.
Amen.
The people that had the most sort of rich personal relationships were the happiest, and that means a lot.
I completely agree with that, man. I think, you know, even, and again, right, like we talk about it quite a bit between like the relationships we have with our clients who have become some of the, you know, some of them a lot like family, you know, some of them are family now. And, you know, those relationships are the things that I hold, you know, dear to my heart, and things that I fall back on when I'm going through tough times myself. You know, I always know that I can lean on those people. I know I can lean on people like Anthony. You know, when I'm going through a hard time, he's seen me go through some struggles in the past couple of years. How do we build those relationships? Like for people who were in your shoes when you were younger, you know, who are struggling to find those positive relationships in life or build those positive relationships in life, like what advice can you give those people to like give them an opportunity to see that there is that option of change, right? There is that option of building those relationships that are going to be the catalyst for a better day in your life.
You got to have charm like Mike.
You know, I mean, it's a really good question. I think if you look in the mirror, it's hard to see who you really are, right? Like it's hard for us to see who we are because we're so close to it. You know what I mean? It's very, very hard to it's a lot easier to negatively judge yourself than to positively judge yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That said, if you really want to see who you are, you got to look at your circle of friends. And your circle of friends are typically going to be able to give you a good snapshot of the kind of person that you are, because people tend to attract similar people. And when I like finally got my shit together, I lost, I don't know, all of my friends outside of a few that are still my dearest friends today, that were not sitting in the middle of that crew with me, that were sitting on the outskirts, kind of like being like, Mikey, come on, man, come out of this shit. Like, you don't have to do this, you know? I can honestly say that the circle of friends that I have today is very tight. It's not a lot of people. And we make it a point to communicate and connect. You know, I think this has given us made it very difficult because we're much more involved in our phones and likes and engagement and comments than sitting down with a buddy and having a burger and talking about life. And, you know, and by the way, I'm a culprit, right? Like I'm not, you know, saying that that's not a big part of my life, because it is. However, I do believe that to generate and cultivate great relationships with people, you have to generate and cultivate great, real face-to-face relationships with people. And a buddy of mine says that he tries to meet a new person every day, actually in person. And this guy is one of the best guys ever. You guys probably know Eric Hinman. You know, Hinman is like, I try to meet a new person every day. And I'm like, that's very cool. I like that sort of philosophy, because you never know. You know, a mentor of mine said something to me early on in my career, and this guy is a legend. His name is Richard Corain. He's Danny Meyer's business partner. And he's my number one mentor. I've run everything by him when it comes to business and really anything. Like, he's just like a guy that I look up to in such a great way. And I like cherish his advice. Anyway, he said to me one day, we were sitting in one of his restaurants, and he goes, you know, every single guest that walks into our restaurant is an opportunity to develop a relationship. If we don't take that opportunity, somebody else will, period. We are walking relationships, every single person, right? Like, and
thank you. I appreciate that compliment.
I believe that though, you know, and so I'm pretty critical when I walk into a restaurant. Like, I'm the kind of guy that you can engage, you can stand at the table and shoot the shit with and have a conversation and ask me questions, and you know, and sometimes I'm like, and I think I put that energy out there too, you know.
Oh, you for sure do. I remember the first time I met you, it was just like, boom. Oh, that's Mike. That's Michael.
Yeah,
well, it sounds familiar, Mendes.
Yeah, I mean, dude, talk about good energy, right? Like,
yeah,
Anthony,
for sure.
You make up, your presence is felt, you know, from like a mile down the fucking road.
Appreciate that.
But, you know, he said to me, he said, you know, every single guest that walks in the door is an opportunity to develop a relationship. And if you don't take it, somebody else will. And I believe that's some of the best advice I've ever given, because a lot of people walk around with self-centered fear. And that means that they walk around thinking that other people are thinking poorly about them, which is totally selfish.
Yeah. Well, no one gives a shit.
Yeah. No one really cares.
No one really cares.
You know, and like, for you to have the audacity to think that that person that you don't know at all, never met in the world, is judging you.
Yeah.
Like, that's
it's absurd.
It's a shitty way to live.
Yeah.
So
I sometimes take somebody to step up and take it, you know, approach that person, you know, because if they're not gonna do it, then who's gonna do it, you know? So you definitely gotta be the one to go over there and say hello.
I say to everybody on my teams, I do it myself. When I walk through a doorway and it's a queue for me, when I walk through a doorway, predominantly public doorways, it doesn't matter what kind of doorway. It could be the doorway to a bathroom. It could be the doorway to a restaurant. It could be the doorway to a store. It could be the doorway out of a store, wherever it is. Walking through an arch like that is a cue for me to smile. Why? Because a smile is disarming. A smile is something that people will see, and actually it releases endorphins in you personally, and it also is just it just makes people feel better. And so I literally say to the crews that I build over the years, like, hey, like, when you walk through the door of the restaurant, smile. When you see somebody walking out of the bathroom, smile. When you walk out of the bathroom, smile. It's so easy. It's so easy, like a big smile. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that is just such a simple thing to do, and is game changing for the person smiling and all the people around them.
I have to definitely agree with that. And you just see that, you know, like you're saying, going back to, you know, the phone being a disruptor, you know, you start seeing some of these little things like smiling and just being aware of the people around you, and
even looking up,
exactly, or looking at you when you're talking to, you know, a lot of these
huge
things,
pet peeve of mine.
a lot of these things you see slowly start dying out. And I'm not saying it's necessarily because it's their fault, or it's because they're bad this, or because they're just being rude. But I think sometimes too, with the way people are being adapted or growing through the environment of certain things, they just lose these capabilities that, you know, we understood when we were younger, when some of these technologies weren't as heavy as they were now, where interacting with people was even bigger than it was before, you know, and how our parents would tell us, well, you know, hey, you know, make sure you say hello, smile, stare at the person when they're talking to you, and make sure you're paying attention. You know, I think some of these things you start seeing a shift, and I think it is important when you can be an example of doing that yourself and bringing that back out and showing that it still exists out there, where a lot of people might think it doesn't, but it actually does. We just have to bring it out, and you know, you yourself have to be the one to do it. You know, if that person's, then you do it. You smile at them. You know, you say hello, you say thank you, you look at them when they're talking to you. And then guess what? They're going to be like, oh shit, like I should be looking at him too. I should be smiling at him too. Okay, I should be more, you know, aware of this going on, you know, and it's just, it'll create that natural effect of, man, and maybe you just did a favor for them and they might leave that conversation you had with you in a more happier mood, and you just did them a favor for their day. They might have had a shitty day, and now that little dose of goodness just literally changed the way that they would have carried the rest of their day on.
You know what? I've been a business owner for 12 years now. I've opened up 16 restaurants.
Amazing.
And I've probably hired well over 1,000 people in my career, for sure. And I interview every single person that comes to work at a restaurant for the opening of the restaurant. I don't interview every single person as we continue, just because that would just be non-scalable. But when we open a restaurant, I am part of the interview process because I take it so seriously. Honestly, the only thing I look for, I don't care what position you're coming in for. There's one thing I care about, and that is your ability to smile, period. I don't give a shit how much experience you have. I don't care what school you went to. I don't care where you're from. If you can't look at me and smile, I got nothing for you, because I can't teach you to do that.
Guys, you heard it. If you're going to come work for Mike, you better have a smile on that resume.
Well, you know, at the restaurants, I call it hire on a smile.
Customer service is king in the restaurant industry, you know, and you're in the most competitive city in one of the most competitive industries, right? So how do you get everybody while dealing with so many unique personalities, right? We talked about earlier how diverse New York City really is, right? So how was it for you managing so many diverse personalities in order to drive the ship forward and be able to create the success that you have in the most competitive market, in the most competitive city?
I mean, that's my oxygen, man. I said it earlier. People are my oxygen. You know, I love disarming negative people. For me, you know, I'm known, famous for being like, you know, there's that table, that disgruntled table. Nothing is going to make them happy. You know, they just hate everything about life. Man, that like fires me up. I'm like going over to that table with intention, and 9 out of 10 times I turn them into lifetime guests. And I don't know what it is. For me, managing people, you know, I think I'd like to say that I'm a good listener. You know, I don't wait to speak. I used to be a wait to speaker. And now over the years, I've learned to become a good listener. And I think leadership has a lot to do with listening. Anybody can speak their mind, have to be heard. I think leaders really are great listeners and intentional listeners. And so I think I've learned to really listen over the years. And I think that's why, like, I've hired 1,000 people, I've probably fired 1,000 people. But I can guarantee you 90% of the people that I've fired today, I could call up right now and be like, hey, you want to come back and work? And they'll be excited, because that's how I go out of my way to listen to people and to be a fair person. And I don't lead with fear. Even though some people say, you know, I just listened to this great book, Relentless by Tim Grover,
yes.
I think.
It's Michael Jordan's coach. Toby's coach too.
And so I was listening to that book, and it was talking about relentless mindset, relentless mentality. And there was a lot that I identified with, but there was also a lot that I did not identify with, because I do care about other people. Winning is not my only, I love to win. I'm not going to lie. I'm very competitive, insanely competitive guy, but winning is not the end all be all for me. I'm not going to stab you in the face to win. I'm going to convince you to join me to win. That's where my talent comes in. I don't have to like push you out of the way or run you over with a truck. I have a really great way of convincing people to want to win with me, as opposed to me having to do it all alone. And so I think, to answer your question, I think that's what it really is. I love building teams. I love getting people fired up about something great, and being able to stand behind something great, stand with something great.
I think it's truly amazing, all the things you said, and it clearly shows, man, why you've had so much success, especially coming out of rough times that you faced and turning yourself around. Like you said, you're living truth of it, that you've made this 180 shift in your life, and look what you've been able to do for yourself, and always knowing that you were a good person. And it's just the energy, the charm, the likeliness of you just being attracted to all these people, and that energy, and just the wanting to help others, and showing up. I think it's just amazing what you've been able to do, and that's why it shows off. Another thing I wanted to bring up, just because I know these are two things that you've been working on. I know your podcast. I want to dive into a little bit about your podcast, because I know I came on. That was really awesome, and I love the whole born or made concept. And I want to dive in a little bit about that. What made you want to start that podcast? What's the reason you got the name? And how is that going for you today?
Yeah, thanks for bringing up the podcast. It's definitely something that I've been.
It's a great listen, by the way. Great listen.
Thanks so much. I mean, Anthony, you are.
Loved it.
It's just a stallion on the mic.
Stallion. I mean, you killed it on there, and so I appreciate you taking the time to do that with me.
Always.
In my heart, I believe that everybody on the planet is born with a talent. And I believe the journey in life is trying to find what that talent is, ideally as quickly as possible, so that we can capitalize on it. I do believe that some people never find it. And so the motivation for me with the podcast was to try to explain my sort of belief in that everybody is born with a very specific talent. And it's like, I guess it's hard to be scientific about it, but like, when you really think about it, certain people are able to pick up a paintbrush and paint like beautiful, incredible masterpieces, right? You give me a paintbrush, I just can't do it. I can't. I mean, if I spent years and years with the best of the best, maybe I'd get somewhat good, but like, I'd never be that natural fine artist. There are certain people that can, from a very young age, open up their mouths and have this unbelievably harmonic voice that just has vibrato, and it just is amazing. They're like, YouTube stars at 3, right? Like, we were born with that shit. Michael Jordan, the guy was just a better basketball player than everybody else on the planet. He was born with that talent. Entrepreneurs, mathematicians, poets, fathers, mothers, there's talent that people are born with. And I believe that our journey is to find what those talents are. So Born or Made came from that idea that, do you believe that you were born with the talent that you were given, or that you live by today, or do you think you were made over time? And I think it's a really interesting topic, because I don't think everybody believes what I believe, that people are born with what they're, what they do really well at. And so I wanted to get the opinions of people like Anthony, people like Gary Vee, people like Lewis Howes. I've had a lot of great people on the podcast, and we talk about it. And I think it's just it's the nature nurture question. I think it's hard to argue that people are born with talent. I I think it's really hard. And I think that people can be made for sure, right? Like if you really dedicate and work hard at something, you can get good at it. But are you going to be as good at that than you could be at your God-given talent? Probably not, you know? And I also believe that like if you spend your life pushing a boulder uphill constantly, and it's constantly just pushing back on you, and you just keep pushing it, and it's not getting any easier, and you just keep going, you keep going. I'm not saying don't fail, because I believe fail often, fail fast, and learn. But like if you just keep pushing this boulder uphill, man,
you're gonna be yoked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but like it's not. Chances are, you're not meant to do that thing.
Right.
And that's okay. And I think the other beauty of it all is like, be okay with changing your mind.
Yeah.
Be okay with pulling the plug on some shit that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
People spend too much time in bad situations.
I agree.
Yeah.
You're in a bad relationship. It hasn't gotten better. You hate being in it. Yo, step outside of your comfort zone. You know what I mean? They say something really cool in this group that I'm in. I'll finish with this, right? Like most people are able to pull themselves out of a bad situation, right? But some people fall into a ditch, metaphor, like start hanging pictures on the wall. You know what I mean? Like get real comfy in the corner of that dirty, dingy ditch and just don't try to pull themselves out. And who the fuck wants to live in a ditch?
That's right.
Get the hell out of the ditch. You can do it. You know what I mean?
And some people are just scared also to ask for help.
Right. Well, it's like you were mentioning earlier, right? It's living in fear. It's like living in that state of, you know, either people are out to get me, or, you know, there's always this external force that's conspiring to hold you down, when really it's inside your own thought process most of the time, right? It's the outlook that you're having on things that's keeping you from being able to see the sliver that's going to take you to where you want to go. Were there commonality? I mean, through having all of these conversations on your podcast, were there any commonalities that you found in your guests, right, that allowed you, or allowed them, for that matter, to, you know, be able to transcend a place where they weren't happy to thriving and living a life of purpose now?
I think, you know, the majority of the people that I've spoken to on the podcast are ambitious people, right? And a large majority of them had to get through some adversity to sort of really sort of get after what they were trying to accomplish. So I do believe that adversity definitely plays a role. I feel like, you know, it sometimes, you know, I say it must be really hard being born into enormous wealth. I think it's got to be really hard, because like some people will be like, oh my God, it would be amazing. Fucking mansions and Mercedes, you know, 16-year-old Mercedes G-Wagons and, you know, whatever. And I'm like,
sick, bro. Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly think that it's probably really hard, because you don't get to fight. And like anybody,
that's where I find my meaning in, you know, it's like through those hard times that I've had as a kid. It's same goes for Mendez. We talk about this all the time. You know, it's very evident that the same is the case for you.
And I think we can all agree too that you see some of the most successful people that built themselves up. You know, and
they all struggle.
And even talking about the kids who were born into it, their parents went through those struggles, or if it wasn't the parents, the grandparents did. You know, so at some point in that line of generation of those who are born into the wealth, someone in there had to go through those struggles to be able to have what those kids have and those parents and all that, and pass it on. But I think it's the amazing part of, you know, starting from the bottom or starting in a place where you don't have all that, it's more the understanding the process of the way that you can just view life in general. It's more the understanding of the appreciation of things, the appreciation of others and the people in your circle, like you mentioned, and understanding that that's the most important thing. I think that's what truly counts as value, when you can come from this place of having to work hard and having to build yourself up to the point where, yeah, you build financial freedom, but the process of it, the learning lessons, all those experiences is a true wealth. And that's what really, I think, you take on with you later on, that you can share and really provide value and knowledge for others out there. And it's just that, to me, that's the uniqueness of everybody's story. That's the uniqueness of your life, of Josh's life, of my life, of everybody else that we talked about. And it's that those moments that we talk about, the process. And I think that's what truly can help, others, by hearing our processes and our experiences.
Yeah, man. I agree. Everybody's got a story.
Everybody does.
Or not,
We appreciate, we're almost at an hour here, man. We, before we wrap things up, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for coming on and sharing quite a bit about your story and being a little bit vulnerable with us, right? I think a lot of highly successful people, a lot of high performers, they only want those that are viewing their content or coming, in your case, coming to their restaurants to see, the successful side. But it's really the struggles that you've gone through that make those connections with people. And I want to say thank you for, coming on here and allowing people to kind of see that side of you, see a different part of you that allows them to, understand that there is a path for them to succeed. And it's not necessarily going to be easy. It usually is not easy unless you do come from generational wealth. And then even then it's still a struggle. Not that I would know, but, but, thank you again for coming on here and opening up to our listeners and giving them a little bit of insight into, what really makes you tick as a person.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me.
Where can people find you on social media, on, where your restaurant's located, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so all the restaurants are in Manhattan and Brooklyn, Meatball Shop and Seamore's.
My Q's friends, you listening right now, my Q's friends, you better be going there real soon.
And you can find me on social media at Michael Chernow, pretty much everywhere. Born or Made is on everywhere you could find your,
literally everywhere.
Subscribe, listen, guys. It's a great podcast, especially the episode with this guy right here.
I just would say the one thing that I would leave everybody with, and Anthony and I met through social media, but really we met because we are deeply involved in the world of better living, of living your life.
Hell yeah.
You know what I mean? Living your life each day, not like it's your last, but it's like it's your best. And I attribute a very large portion of my general day-to-day happiness to the world of fitness and nutrition and eating well. And I would just say, for anybody out there that is looking for an opportunity to feel better, be better, look better, the world of fitness is wide open for the taking. I've met very few people that have started down the path of fitness that has ever regretted it. It is how I changed my life. It is how I went from an alcoholic and a drug addict to a husband, a father, a business owner, a better son, a better brother. All of that is a direct line to me finding a way to drop wins in my day, right? Little wins throughout my day, work out in the morning, eat a healthy breakfast, eat a healthy lunch, have a little treat snack, like be nice to myself. But like these wins that we're able to drop in our day, no matter what's happening around the world, with fitness and wellness and nutrition, you are able to win multiple times every single day.
Mhm.
And those wins add up to happiness and better living and better being. So don't live every day like it's your last, but live every day like it's your fucking best.
Boom.
Whew, I couldn't have said that better. And you know what? You probably even answered the question that I was going to ask you, because I always ask, what's the biggest
Yeah,
piece
he
of
beat you to the
advice?
punch there. He knew it was coming.
Yep. I always ask,
He
what's
knew
the
it was
biggest piece
coming.
of advice that you can leave off with all our listeners? And I think you just did that.
Yeah, you really have to be able to, help yourself and take care of yourself in order to be able to then, help and take care of others. And you're obviously doing an amazing job of that yourself with your businesses, with your restaurants, with your family, with the things Mendes has told me about what you're doing now in health and wellness. It's all amazing stuff, man. And any way that we can help you, please let us know. Anytime you want to come back on the podcast, you're always more than welcome to.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you again, man. We really appreciate
We're
it.
always here, brother.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you taking the time.
Hell yeah, man.
You too, man. Until next time, guys. See you
Much love.
later.
Peace.